In this video, we're going to have a look at adding and subtracting of integers. Because integers consist of positive as well as negative numbers, addition and subtraction of integers can consist of a whole lot of signs. For example, you could be asked to add a negative value, or you could be asked to subtract a positive value. We already know that the plus of a positive value does not have to be shown. So in reality, when I subtract a positive value, I simply subtract. Similarly, when I think about adding a negative value, I'm going to give you a negative amount, which in the end also simply means subtracting. So it is important to remember that when I add a negative value or subtract a positive value, the end result is subtracting. But what will happen when I subtract a negative value? You can think of it this way. See the -4 as something that you owe. What if I tell you that I will take away what you owe? Surely, for you, that will be a positive outcome. So you can remember that whenever I have two different signs next to each other, the result will be negative, and two of the same signs next to each other will have a positive result. Now that you can determine the sign, we can have a look at the different cases of adding and subtracting. The first case is when you have a positive value, and to that you add another positive one. In a case like this, you will always end up with a positive value because you simply made a positive value even more positive or bigger. The second option is when you start with a negative value and then make it even more negative by subtracting from it. In this case, you will always end with a negative answer. The third case is when you start with a positive value and then subtract something from it. For example, if you start with a +5 and subtract 2 from it, you will end with a positive value of 3. Or you can even subtract 5 from 5 and then we'll end with 0. And now that we know about the negative part of our number system, we can even subtract more than 5. If we subtract 8 from 5, we'll end with a value of -3. So because we subtracted a bigger value than the original one we had, we ended with the negative value of their difference. So you can see that you can either end with a positive value or 0, or even a negative value if you subtract something that is bigger than the original value. Our fourth case is when you start with a negative value and then add something. Again, in this case, you can say that when I add something that is smaller than the original negative number, I will end with a negative number. Or I can add exactly the same number than the original negative one, and this will end with a 0 answer. And I can even add something bigger than that original 5, and when I do that, I will end with a positive number. So now we have all 4 options for adding and subtracting, so let's go and have a look at some examples. Example, calculate the following. In the first example, we start off with a +8, and then we have 2 signs. So I'm reminding you that when I have 2 different signs, the result will always be negative. This means we start off with 8 and take away 7 to end with 1. In example 2, we start with a -10, and again we have 2 signs which results in a -5. So this means that we have the second case. This is because we are making a negative value even more negative. and that means we will end with minus 15. In example 3, we once again start with minus 10, but this time we have two minuses next to each other. Remember, two of the same signs always result in a plus. So this means we are moving in the positive direction 3 units. The value we're adding is smaller than the original minus 10, which means we still end on the negative side of the number line at minus 7. In example 4, we start off with a positive 15. And now we subtract a value that is bigger than this original 15, which means we are moving to the left and we are passing 0 going into the negative side of the number line. To determine how far into the negative side we move, we need to get the difference between 15 and 21, and that is 6. This means our final answer is negative 6. When we move on to adding and subtracting bigger numbers, we start by identifying where we have two signs next to each other. We need to determine the result of these signs. So, the first time we have two signs next to each other is a plus and a minus, which results in a minus 230. And next we have two minuses, which will always be a plus. And now we have many different ways in which we can add these four numbers. Remember that the associative and commutative properties are valid for addition, and that means you can choose which of these you want to add up first. Because 445 and 440 only differ by 5, I'm going to choose to start with these two. So I'm going to start at minus 445 and add, which means move to the right 440. This is a bit less than the original 445, so I'll end with a negative value. This negative value is the difference between 445 and 440. So I will have minus 5. So adding these two up, I end with negative 5. Now I have two values left that I need to add up. So I'm going to start with minus 230. And to that I'm going to add 222. Again, the value that I'm adding is smaller than the original 230, which means I end with a negative value. This negative value is the difference between 230 and 222, which means it's minus 8. So I need to take minus 5 and subtract 8. When I subtract from an already negative value, I'm making it even more negative. So my answer will be minus, and in this case, minus 13. Remember that you could have also chosen to start on the left, move to the right systematically, and you would have also gotten minus 13. In the next video, we're going to have a look at how to multiply and divide integers.